I want to thank all of the teachers out there for participating today. I want to thank Karen and Lindsay for their efforts. Karen in particular has been organizing all these webinars last week and this week and into the future weeks. So many thanks to Karen and your sleepless hours. Lindsay, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. For all those teachers out there, we know these are challenging times for all of you and all of us. We look forward to offering help as we can. We know that you're doing such a great job for students, and you will do such a great job for students. So we ask that you all give yourself some time, give yourself some patience, start small, take deep breaths, and have confidence in the work you're doing. As a teacher, you're doing such great work to serve your students, and it's really, truly amazing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen and Lindsay, and thanks everybody.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing okay. It's been a whirlwind of learning and fun over the last few days. So again, I'm really grateful to Lindsay for doing the presentation today. And I hope you will join us in some of our other webinars this week. We have a lot going on, and we'll talk about that later. Lindsay is in the webcam, and then she's also, there she is looking like she's somewhere lovely in a faraway country. Are you?
Yes, that was in Spain.
Okay, so there's Lindsay in Spain, and I think she's cute. She's never seen The Wizard of Oz, and she's a competitive runner, and she has 2 girls. Okay, just to spice things up, why haven't you seen The Wizard of Oz?
I have no clue. I've been the Wicked Witch of the West 3 times, but I've never seen The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
And first of all, I apologize for moving on everyone in there. That's something you're never supposed to do in a webinar, but I realized I left my office door open, so the aforementioned 2 girls could easily come in, and I decided it was best to close the door.
Okay, thank you. So we're super happy to have you. Thank you. So without much further ado, we are going to talk about, this is our agenda, right? So we're going to talk about remote learning and the reality of that, the Super 6 strategies with examples, and then Lindsay's going to open up to you the world of resources, a quick overview of several different resources, I guess, in her cold toolkit, and then we're going to open up for questions. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, we hope. I'm gonna hand it over to you, Lindsay. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. So these are the main goals for today. My first goal is to help build a sense of confidence, that you all realize that you already have the tools and the knowledge to do what you're being asked to do. I know this is stressful times, trust me, I feel it myself, but you have the skills and the capability of doing this. Identify some of these 6 critical strategies for success, and then we're going to go over the toolkits, and then we're going to open up for questions. So before we get started, part of my intro was microlearning. Microlearning is a new tool being used in professional development where training is done in between 3-minute and 10-minute segments. This is actually pretty useful for all of you here, because as we're designing online courseware, one thing I'm going to want you to think about is trying to keep your content to about 3 to 10 minutes at a time, and to try to break it up into more manageable pieces. The idea here is for flexibility and simplicity. So we can go on to the next slide. All right, one thing I want you to think about, that as I give you a lot of suggestions here, is you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you just need to attach it to a new wagon. So what we're really saying here is you're going to do what you've always done. We're just doing it in a new medium, which is online, which does require a little bit of creativity, and that's some of the reality of online learning right now. The reality is it's not going to be the same as it is in the classroom. However, that doesn't mean we still cannot meet our instructional goals. And that is my focus for today, to give you these strategies. All right, so as I move forward, I want you to think of these mantras. First of all, I will plan with intent. And we always plan with intent. But you're going to have to be very careful when you do it online. You have to really think carefully about what you're doing and making sure it's understandable. The second is I will consolidate tasks. Instead of 10 tasks, give them 3 to 4. I will start with tools that I know, which I actually firmly believe in. Right now, as educators, we're being given all kinds of tools, free resources. I think my email's gotten 20 in the past 3 days. I'm actually going to tell you to take a pause and stay with the tools that you're already using and do the activities that you're using. And the final one is I will know my learner. So as we design our learning, really centered around your students. We know our students very well by now, and we know what they can access. So in these first critical few weeks, I would start with using resources that you know and your students know. This brings us to the 6 simple strategies. And what I will tell you from my experience from designing online courseware and designing activities that kids do in the classroom and online and having high success rate, the more of these that you can include, the higher potential for success and the higher rate of student completion. First of all, keep everything familiar. Keep it simple. Keep it flexible. Keep it authentic. Keep it well organized. And finally, keep it communicated. And we're going to go through and talk about these, and there is some overlap, and you're going to start seeing what I'm talking about as we go. All right, so the first one is keep it familiar. Aim to replicate tasks that you do in the classroom. This is not the time to try that brand new thing you heard about in a conference 6 months ago. I would start, honestly, with tasks that are familiar. If you are stressed, they're stressed. This is not the time. Avoid new sites and programs, at least initially. You know, if you use quizzes, if you use Quizlet, you use, what's another one? Gimkit, you can do those for assignments as well. Try to stay with things that you know right now. Let's get us all into the rhythm. And then if you're going to try new stuff, try it with the class that you know can handle it. Don't stress yourself out. Don't stress the students out. Fear and confusion usually means work's not completed. And so keep it familiar. For example, if anyone here uses quizzes or Kahoot, you can give them a quick, easy link to access them. It will track the student's progress, and you can see who did it and who has done it, essentially. The biggest things with these on the presentation, they are live links. So when you get access to it later, you can click on them and you can get to those sites as well. And all right, so here's a couple of more of my familiar tips. The good thing, as I said before, we're being given a lot of resources out there. And some of these are brand new and they're going to require setting up a new account, potentially setting up a student account. Personally, I would recommend avoiding those for a little bit. And like I said, please don't feel like you need to try everything all at once. All right, this is my favorite. Keep it simple. Aim to combine tasks into one assignment or task. Avoid multiple logins and downloads. We all know nothing's more frustrating than having to do 3 or 4 different downloads. Personally, I prefer condensing everything into one main task or deliverable that they do each day. That makes things a lot easier for you and the students. It's easier for you to grade and manage, and it's also easier for them to do. Simple doesn't mean it's going to be easy. You can make something fairly complex but still simple, but consolidate into one task. And we're ready for the next slide. Perfect. So here's my keep it simple tips. Keep the agenda on one page with links to activities. If you have Google Classroom, avoid having multiple links underneath the agenda. It's just too much for them to click. Do activities kids can access with one click. They click on it and they do it. It just simply makes it easier. Again, instead of giving 5 tasks, try to bring it down to 3. The reality is I would keep them around 20 minutes of active working, 20 to 30 probably. I'd max out at 30. That keeps it simple and you can get some real quality work for them. Think of quality over quantity. Whoops. All right, so here's some of my simple assignment starts. This is for all my low tech people, okay? And also for some of my high tech people. Class discussion. You post a question to Google Classroom. Kids can answer and give their opinion and respond to each other. There's great websites out there to do this. I'd start here. It's all in one location. Written assignments. You give a prompt, kids write on a piece of paper, they take a picture of it, they turn it in. It's simple. They don't need to open up Google Docs. They can just take their piece of paper, their pencil, and write. I did that today with a class of 25 kids. Most of them never do their homework. I got 21 of the 25. They just thought it was a lot easier. A speaking assessment. Kids can just record their response using a voice memo and turn it in. You can set up a Google Voice number if your school will allow you to, and they can use that. So if you're a foreign language teacher, that's an easy way to get it done. Reading assessment, add kids to read the excerpt and give their opinion in format 1 or 2. Things like this, things that are low tech sometimes are simpler for the students. And also with how much screen time they're getting, it's maybe not a bad idea to bring it down a little bit.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes.
Is voice memo a part of Google Classroom?
Voice memo can be done on a phone. So students could just record themselves speaking on their phone and they can upload it. So
Okay.
it's simple. The idea here is you want to take away any barrier that would make it slower for them to do their work. And the nice thing of just letting kids write on a piece of paper, they can take a picture and they turn it in. There's no barrier. You can't argue, I don't know my login, I don't understand Google Docs. You take a picture, you turn it in. There's not much else you can say. And they're also spending so much time on their phones right now and so much time on their computers. Frankly, I think they might sort of like it to have to sit there and write and do something. So that's another way to think about it as well. Go ahead.
Yep. Oh, so when they're turning in, are they emailing it to you or are they uploading it to Google Classroom?
Uploading it to Google Classroom, I would recommend.
And the same with the voice recording?
Yes. Yep.
The kids know how to do that?
My students do. Most do know how to do it. If you go to Google Classroom, when you go to turn in an assignment, you can upload a file. They can just upload it that way.
Okay. Great.
All right. Again, I think where we just went back, or did we get a read?
Hold on. We did go back.
Oh, keeping it flexible. This is going to repeat a lot of what I said before. Allowed multiple ways to turn in an assignment. Again, I will go over that in a minute. Consider the student learning curve. I know we have deadlines. They're stressed, they're confused, as many of us are. Be considerate with that, especially in the first week or so, and especially if you're using a new program. And the last one is one that I feel very strongly with, is I do project-based learning. Especially right now, we're doing a big project-based learning in all my classes. And it allows them to be creative and allows them to apply their learning. And every day they have to do a small deliverable, which will lead to their final project. This allows a little bit of student choice. So right now, if you have something that you know the kids will enjoy learning, this might be the time to sort of implement it during this high stress time.
You ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, either or assignments, meaning if I'm a foreign language teacher, we have to work on vocabulary occasionally. I might say either do this Quizlet activity, do this quizzes activity, or take a picture of the word, take a picture of yourself writing the words in Spanish and drawing a picture, something like that. Flexibility, I would give a couple options on something that just seems a little dry. Multiple ways to turn it in, like I just said. Allow them to take pictures of assignments and just turn it in. That might be easier for some of your students. Some of your students may not have a computer. I have one class that only, I think, half say they have a computer that they really know how to use. They're more comfortable on their phones. So providing flexibility is a good idea here. That kind of goes down to number 3, options on tools. Trying to make sure everything's pretty friendly. being considerate with their confusion. And again, I do firmly believe doing some project-based learning and having every day they do a small piece of it sort of helps them a little bit, gives them that check-in, and it allows them to also apply their creativity.
How do you help them monitor what they're getting done? So if they have a project, how do you help them sort of pace themselves and stay focused?
Yes, good question. So what I do when I make a project base, for example, their project is what makes a song good? Like what's a good song? So day one today is they had to just reflect on what are their 2 favorite songs. They turn that in. The next day, give me the criteria for a favorite song. They give the criteria. And then day 3, I'm going to say, okay, bring your 10 criteria down to 5. Day 4, here's 10 songs. Which 3 meet your criteria? So taking down the project into very small bite-sized pieces, sort of like what you would do in class, and maybe even a little less. And having them do that and say, every day you must turn this in. And if you break it up into the smaller pieces, it helps students, and also can really help some of your students with their 504 and IEP plans, because you're providing that regular check-in for them that, wait a minute, this is not what I'm looking for. So you're providing those accommodations for all of your students. I'm a big proponent of, I'll provide accommodation supports for any student that needs it. By breaking up into these small pieces, you provide those supports, and they're also getting opportunity to be creative in the same measure as well.
But it's every day. It's not that you're giving them something and it's due Wednesday, but it's every day. This is what's due today, and they have to hand it in to you.
Yeah, and they can choose how they hand it in. That's where the flexibility comes in. And if you do a project, sometimes you can give a topic that allows them to be creative. All right, authentic, pretty much stay with your style. Follow content that makes sense. If you're a high-tech person, you're probably going to have them doing a lot of tech, and that's okay, and they're probably used to it. If you are a teacher that really doesn't do a lot of tech, giving them about 3 new websites to create accounts with just doesn't make sense. Stay with who you are as a teacher, and you can follow that. If you're like me who does a lot of projects, you can do that. If you're someone that has them do a lot of readings and a lot of listening and watching videos and reflecting, continue on that. Try to continue on with what you're doing in the classroom. You know your learners very well. And here's the other thing, the students know you. So if you're borrowing stuff from other teachers, that's a great, and we should always collaborate and share, but you can still make it your own and make sure it makes sense with what you're doing, because your voice is important as well. All right, organized. Clearly label each task. Embed links in one document so that students can access it if you need it. Funny story, today I decided to give an assessment and it was in separate links, not on the main document. Took us about 15 minutes to find it. So I have to take my own advice. Keep it organized. Be very clear about what you want them to do. And I think the next one is sort of how I do it. So this is how I do my agenda here. I give them the puedos, which is what they have to do. I give them the itinerary and the instructions. They say, complete your March Madness, click here to vote. Literally everything is condensed into one document. For your students that need extra explanations, this is useful because you're giving very clear instructions on what needs to be done and they can access it.
So this is a document in Google Classroom with hyperlinks, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So everything where you say here, that takes you to somewhere important, where there are forms or videos, and it's all in one place, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Beautiful. I have a question. Do your students work on projects as partners or groups? If so, what is your expectation about what means they use to collaborate?
Well, for right now, we're going to do individual projects. That's a really good question. Usually what I do, if they're going to do collaboration, And if it's going to be in a sense online where I have not been able to observe as their teacher from what I can see they're doing, usually part of the deliverable is each student does a confidential reflection of what did they contribute to the project and what did their partners contribute to the project. And when it's in the classroom, I tell them, you need to be honest with me because I know what I'm seeing on an observation. So you need to tell me who's done what. And I expect the work to be reasonably fair. If I was doing it online, which I will probably try with a couple of my classes, I will ask that they all work on the same Google Doc because you can go look at the history and I can see who has contributed what.
That's great.
And that's what I would do in that one.
Thank you. I have another question here. What are you using to give tests or assessments, if anything?
I'm going to get to that a little bit later on the strategies on that.
We can parking lot that if you want.
We'll parking lot that one.
Okay, but we will get back to it.
Yeah.
Whoops. Sorry. Okay.
All right. Keep it communicated. Always email the student and parents at the start of each week. I've taught online with the Virtual Learning Academy. One thing I'll say, everyone says no one reads email. You'd be surprised, actually. Always email the students and parents. At the beginning of each week, I just email the norms to both student and parent, all students and all parents, and say what's going on for this week. If there's an issue with certain students, I always CC the parents. Odds are one of them is going to read it at some point and get back to me. You always need to do that. It saves you a lot of time in the long run. And then at the end of the week, anyone who hasn't turned in work, I say, hey, I noticed you haven't turned in work. Is everything okay? Do you need help? I always lead with do you need help versus why haven't you done anything? Even if that's how I feel internally. Usually, sometimes there could be a problem. Someone's internet could be down. Someone may not have a computer. Okay, then we need to get more flexible. So that's why I always try to lead with that.
I have another question. Anne is asking, I see on the agenda that you have live office hours. Can you speak to this? What site do you use? How do you do that?
All right, so I use Zoom. At Pinkerton, what we're supposed to do is we do have some office hours. So the first 20 minutes of every class, I make sure I'm available for my students for extra help because a lot of their work's individual. So for the first, I would say third of each period of what we meet, the students can come online. Some I just put on Spanish music and they work and they ask me questions. Hey, I turned this in. Did you see it? Oh, I liked that reading. It was funny. I'm online for that. So I use Zoom. With Zoom, one thing you want to be careful of if you're teaching middle schoolers or high schoolers, they are adolescents and they're not always the most mature in the world. You do want to make sure you mute their audio and mute their video so you can set norms and expectations. Mm-hmm. So Zoom is a very popular one. Right now we're using GoToMeeting. Google Hangouts is also out there. I prefer Zoom, I'm going to be very honest, or GoToMeeting because you can automatically mute people. Hangouts, you cannot always mute people. But that is also something you need to talk to your school about to make sure that they're fine with you having the virtual office hours.
That's pretty great. I know a lot of other classroom teachers who are having like classroom meetings daily. Mm-hmm. You know, in elementary school, they're having classroom meetings first thing in the morning. So I have another question here. If using Google Classroom, how do you give them a doc with the links, but they can't edit the document? But I'm not sure. I think there was a little typo in this question. I guess maybe how can they edit that document that you're sharing with them in Google Classroom?
They can. It depends. That's a good Google Classroom tutorial question. When I share my agenda with them, it's usually just a non-editable document. But if it's something that they need to edit and turn in, I can make a copy for each student automatically, and they can just go in and edit it. But that's a very good Google Classroom tutorial question. But yes, you can do it that way.
And if they're in view only, they can still open the live links? Yes. Okay. Google document of this presentation is giving error for slide 6. Okay. All right. That's it for the questions right now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so this is the communication. This is how I tend to do things. Mondays, like my mass email on tasks. It's also a good way to say to parents, hey, do you have any questions? Okay. And then what my plan is, I can tell you right now, is at the end of this week, if students have not turned in work, I'm going to email them and their parents with the viewpoint of, hey, you know, is everything okay? I notice you haven't done due assignments. Is everything okay? That will be my plan. And usually by doing that, you sort of covered yourself a lot to make sure that you're just reaching out to parents and students. And if you have students with 504s, IEPs, you may want to also talk to their case coordinator as well, because there could be other problems or other concerns or other struggles going on. All right, so after this, we're going to go through some of the questions that I was submitted before. But again, what I'm going to say here is these are just my 6 simple strategies. When I make something, I really try to ask myself these questions. Is it familiar? Is it simple? And usually that's where I get myself in trouble. Is it flexible? Meaning, is there multiple ways for kids to do this? Can they use an iPad, phone? Is there another option there for my kids that just don't like internet-based programs? Is it authentic? Is it something the kids will look at and go, oh, that's Senora Mitchell? Or is it organized? Meaning, can anyone figure it out? Honestly, could I hand it to my 9-year-old and could she figure it out? Is really what it comes down to. And finally, is this well communicated and is this out of left field? And what I can tell you in my 13 years in the classroom, 11 years online, the biggest problems I usually see is if you're not hitting, I would say around 4 of these, if not more. Anytime I look at things that don't go well, usually you're missing some of these, okay? And to me, I will say it again, I really think the simple, the familiar, and authentic and organized are the most important. The flexible, sometimes there really is only a way to do an assignment. But I find those 4, for me personally, have helped bring the greatest success.
A question. When you're teaching online, or if you're in your classroom and you're giving stuff online, or now, right, when we're working online, there's a teacher who wrote in, how much time do you spend chasing down non-turned in assignments? Any wisdom there?
Well, pretty much what I would do. Well, I'll first speak to my online teaching at BLAX. Every week we do triage, as I call it, and I email students and parents, hey, I haven't noticed anything for a week. By 2 weeks, I might call. For my online students, pretty much, that's a good question. I think a lot of this depends on, first of all, are there any accommodations? If there's some accommodations, you, of course, are going to probably have to chase down those students a little bit more than others. I would just designate a day, like give yourself maybe an hour to where you try to chase down some students by email and CC their parents. And then from that list, maybe come up with some that's a critical issue, meaning they're 2 assignments behind now. So like now you're getting ready to give assignment number 3. So then you might really want to start emailing, and that might be a good reach out to guidance counselors and a phone call to the parents. Hey, I've noticed that Sally has not turned in 3 assignments. We're getting ready to do this. Is everything okay? At Pinkerton, them participating on a regular basis is required. They're required to do some of their daily work. So if you're starting to get to about 2, maybe 3 assignments, you might want to follow up on those. I hope I've answered your question on that one.
I have a great question here.
I'm sorry, Karen.
Go, Mike.
Karen, just to interject too, I don't know if this was part of the question, but in Google Classroom does give you the ability fairly easily to see who has completed assignments and who hasn't, and then automatically email the people who haven't. So I'm not sure if that was the point of the question, but realize that is a feature of Google Classroom. And the other thing is I'll put a pitch out. I think it's tomorrow, Karen, or Wednesday, we have another Google Classroom webinar.
Tomorrow, 1 o'clock.
Yep, those are good. Those are good mentions. And what he said is correct. You can set automatic emails on Google Classroom, and you can also, I believe, also send it to the parent. Hey, I noticed you're behind in your work. You know, do you need help? One thing I would jump on that, if you have a student that's really behind, sometimes a more personal email helps as well. So you could have a group of kids that just get the general email, hey, I noticed you're behind in your work. Do you need help? If you have that one student's a high flyer who really needs individual attention, one of those more personal emails saying, hey, I've noticed you're really behind and I'm getting concerned because I don't want you to be behind too much. Having that more personal email to the parent and the student might also be useful.
Thank you for that. I agree. I like this question here. How do you incorporate paraprofessionals in your remote teaching, particularly with IEP students? Have you had to do that, or have you managed to do that?
I have a few on my current list right now. So what the paraprofessionals do is they ask to see the daily agenda and their case coordinators. So I share the daily agenda and the daily agenda and the daily agenda with the case coordinator and their paraprofessional. That usually works well because then they know what they should be to have done. And then if the students on a lot of the Google Form activities, they can get a copy that they did it. So they can also show it to their paraprofessional. That helps as well.
And so the paraprofessional is in Google Classroom with you?
My students right now don't have paraprofessionals in my classroom. I have a few that do have them, but they function pretty well in my classroom, and or for some reason they don't need the services in my specific classroom. But that's one way that they've kind of worked around for some of my students that have case coordinators and other people that support them. They said, you know, hey, Lindsay, can we see the copy of the agenda for today just so we know where they should be? So I share that. And that's usually a nice, easy way for them to see where they should be. And then if they're on Google Classroom, on Aspen, where we keep our grade, they see day one. And if they see nothing's been turned in, they can look at the agenda and say, hey, this is what should have been done. So it's a way just to keep everyone in the loop.
Okay. But theoretically, if a paraprofessional was working with a student in your class, you could share that student's work via Google Classroom.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, via Google Drive in the Google Doc. And
okay. I'm just going to have a little nice response here. I'm a co-teacher to that question, I think, in Google Classroom, and I have found it very helpful to assist my students with ongoing work. Okay.
All right. So
go assessments.
Yeah, we already talked about the meeting software, so those are there. These are just sample sites for formative assessments. These are the ones that I like. My favorite is probably quizzes, mainly because you give them a link, they click, they go. You can't get more simple than that. Okay. Quizlet's probably my second favorite. You can give them a link, they click on it, they do practice assessments, you can see who did it. You do need a pro account for that, by the way, but it's still useful. You can give them a link and say, go practice 3 activities. I can tell me which ones you did. I can go in and see that they did it. Socrative is a really good one for formative assessments. If you're going to give a live formative assessment, Socrative is a very good one. They go in to the website, they enter your room number. This one would require a little bit of a tutorial for some people. And then you have the questions and they answer them. And it shuffles the questions for you. So they can't text their friend and say, hey, are you working on number 2? What's the answer? They're going to be different. So it's a good one to use for that. I also have another couple tricks to get around that I do use that I can explain in a minute, but Socrative is also another good one.
Whoops.
These are good sites for discussion. Parlay is used by some people at my school. You pose a question, you go into the Parlay website, you pose a question, you get a link, You give it to the kids, they click on the link, they write their responses, and they can have a discussion. Flipgrid, kids love it or hate it, is my experience. They love it or they hate it. There's no in between. They go to a link, they record themselves talking, they can put emojis over their faces, and they can respond to each other. My kids personally don't like it. They find they just don't like taking videos of themselves, but some love it in other classes. So I think it really just depends on your students. Google Classroom, personally, I think is the easiest. On Google Classroom, you can post a question, kids can respond, and they can respond to each other. It's easy. It's all in one location. If you're already putting your agenda in there, might as well have a discussion on Google Classroom. Padlet is a similar thing as to Parlay. You can post a prompt on a board and kids can write their answers and post pictures. Big important task. Padlet, you can approve the post before it's visible. Make sure you do that. Okay, just to make sure that everyone's being appropriate, which is usually okay, but they're teenagers who, in some cases, who've not left the house for 7 days. So just make sure we know our learner on that one.
Lindsay, I think Padlet, I think that Padlet can be free as a trial.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant. Like it's free for a trial, but it's not super expensive. I think it was $10.
I have a quick question here. A colleague uses Socrative in her classroom. And then you can use it online, obviously, yes?
Yes, you can. The hard thing with Socrative, I believe you can only host one live assessment at a time. So if you do a Socrative, they are going to need to come online at a certain time and take the assessment. So you would still launch it. You'd give them, they go to your room number, and they can go take the assessment.
But it's at that time.
Yeah, and I believe it's live until you stop hosting it. So the way you could work around it is at Pinkerton, they're supposed to be working on items within a certain time frame. So what I could say, if you're in my Spanish class, I could say, okay, we're doing our assessment on Socrative between 1 and 2. I'm just giving a number here. And that's okay, this is the room code, everyone. The assessment's live and everyone has to go in and take it. So Socrative is doable for you to do online.
And Socrative is free? Of the ones you've discussed, what's free?
Anything on Google Classroom's free. Also, you could use Google Forms. Use Flubaroo with Google Forms. That would be free as well. And that's why I said, to me, Google Classroom, using modifications within the Google Drive series, whether it's Forms, anything in there, that's honestly the easiest option for you.
Flipgrid's free right now, right?
Yes.
And Kahoot is free, right? The other, they're all free.
Yeah, there's free options right now, I believe.
Okay, here's a big one. You may or may not have a question. Are you doing okay with the questions, Lindsay, or do you want to keep going? We can answer some later. You good?
We're just about done with all of this anyway. So how about we'll take one more, and I just want to show the other couple sites here, and then we can just start going into the list of questions that people provided.
Okay. So I'll throw this one.
Karen.
Yes, Mike.
Karen, I do need to interject from the fact that these are being sponsored by the Department of Education. So I need to be clear to make sure that we say you need to check with your schools, districts, in terms of making sure that any of these software products that you use are compliant with whatever requirements they have for student privacy and use of data. I know that's a big thing right now through school districts. So your IT folks have probably looked into these things for your own school districts, but please make sure you do.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So just one more quick question. How do you give a summative objective time to test in Google Classroom? It's an important kind of assessment for this teacher because he teaches AP classes.
Okay, that's a really good one. All right, so what you can do in Google Classroom is you can schedule a post. So I can give you the best answer to this one. You can create an assessment, how I would do it personally is I'd create an assessment through Google Forms that will be auto-graded through Fluebrew. And then I would schedule it on Google Classroom to be posted at a certain time. And I did that today actually with an assessment. It got posted at a certain time. It was launched, so it was available for my students. And then I told them, you will have from this time and this time to finish it. And after that, you can remove it from Google Classroom. But you're going to have to do the removal yourself, I believe. That's what I did. So that's probably about the closest I can think of right now. If I thought about it for another 24 hours, I might be able to figure it out for you. That's probably about the closest I can think of that for Google Classroom for you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right. All right. So we'll go.
Oh.
These other. This is just two more
great
tools.
stuff.
I know. You teach online enough, you learn them all. Vocaroo is a free online recorder. You go to the website, you click on the red button, you speak, you record yourself, you get a link. It's simple. My kids do this for Google Classroom. So I ask a question in Spanish, they go there to record themselves, and then they give me a link. It's easy and it's free. So I tend to use Google Classroom for a lot of my discussions. And Screencastify is just a way to record your screen. All right.
And
so,
we'll have demos of that on some of our recorded webinars. So if anyone has questions about that, we'll connect you with some of those instructions.
All right. So let's go to the next slide. All right. These are the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and so I have these here. The first one, best practices that work. A lot of what we've talked about are the best practices I have found in my experience. That's the best thing I can say on that one. Is there a way to get high school students to hand the work in? Again, keeping it as simple and easy to turn in is probably your best bet. That's why I like to take a picture, turn it in. We really can't get more simple than that for them. Okay. Do you advise mini lessons versus lessons you would normally do in person? Yes, yes, yes. Please cut it down. That was the whole microlearning when I was introducing that. When I do my instructional videos, they're 5 minutes tops. That's it. And then they apply it. And that's the focus for the lesson. Some of the reality of learning online, we're not going to cover as much in that one day as we likely would in person. Unfortunately, that's probably the reality. However, what you can do is maybe do smaller objectives, but make sure they know it really well. And that would be my suggestion. How do you keep a personal relationship with your students from afar? Ooh, that's a good one. You know, I would say reaching out if you're concerned, if you don't see something turned in, and leading with the, are you okay? I want to make sure you're doing okay. Or, just leading with a little less of, why haven't you given this to me? Leading with that more softer end will usually help. Also say, hey, I really like what you did yesterday. That looked really great. Maybe this would be a fun tip. Take your student list. I have 125 kids. Break them up into groups of 7 or 8 and say, I'm going to email these 8 kids today about something, and I'm not gonna say, hey, why didn't you turn something in? Just say, hey, good job staying on track. It can be that. Or I liked the song you picked for your favorite song. Just something a little bit more personal. So it's not all about the business. How can I support the students on my caseload through remote learning? I think a lot of the personal relationships will probably help. If you're talking about being a case coordinator, maybe reaching out to their teachers too, saying, hey, how is so-and-so doing? Things like that. And if you're also on the Google Classroom, things like that can help as well. What strategies should teachers keep in mind to support English language learners online? Yes, closed captioning is good. Probably very clear and concise language would really help, because they're needing to learn a new system, they're learning a new way of learning, and it's all online. So keeping things very clear and concise. If they have teachers who are perhaps not very clear and concise, maybe finding ways to get access to the agendas or the tasks so you can help break it down a little bit.
Okay.
And
Can I hit you up with some more questions?
of course.
Okay. So how to manage student integrity on Google Classroom?
Okay, so we're gonna deal with the academic integrity one because I can tell that's a concern. There's a couple different ways you can go about this. The first way is you can make an assessment and you can make version A, B, and C. And on Google Classroom, you can assign work to kids separately. So you can give kids different assessments. So there is a way, I'm not sure if any teachers do this, when you give a test, you might have version A and version B, excuse me, and you just pass them around and no one knows what version they have. So that sort of helps cover that one. You can do the same thing online through Google Classroom. So you can assign, when I assign a formative, for example, I can assign it to the entire class or I can pick the students who are going to get that one. So you can mix it up that way. The other way you can kind of do that is you can assign very open-ended questions and open-ended tasks where the students, it's going to be very obvious if they copied someone else's work. That's probably one of my favorites to do, is to do an open-ended. Tell me what you did yesterday. The odds of you doing exactly word for word what someone did yesterday is probably very minimal, even if you're all in the house, even if you're all staying at home. Odds are there's going to be differences there. The third thing I like to do is I call it, I think it's on one of the later slides, it's general questions I've been asked before, is I call it if-then scenario. So what I'll do is, for example, maybe your summative is writing an essay about a topic. Where is it? Yeah, right there.
Yep.
Write an essay about a topic. Okay, and there's 4 topics there. I'd say, okay, so if your last name is between A and D, you do question 1. And if your last name's between this and this, you do question 2. And you assign it that way. That way everyone's technically doing a different task. And frankly, I don't think they'll take the time to chase down the people on different ends of the alphabet. I mean, realistically, especially if you give a time frame, if you do one of those timed ones and say, hey, you have an hour to do this, they'll just do their best, because the time it will take to chase down someone in the class, okay, so-and-so has the same last name as me, I think, so how do I reach this? It's just not going to happen. But I really find the open-ended, and then that last one tends to work the best. In terms of academic integrity, as in citing resources, online dictionaries for if you're a foreign language teacher, one thing I've always said to my kids is if you use an outside resource more than what I've given you, you need to cite your source. That way I know that something was used. If you don't cite your source and then I see something questionable, that becomes a more serious conversation. So those tend to eliminate the worst. Not saying you won't have a couple potentially, but that should bring it down a little bit.
I'm gonna go back. Go for it.
I'm sorry, Karen. I was just going to add one more thing. I know some teachers, they're actually, like you said, Lindsay, earlier, they are releasing an assessment at a certain time in Google Classroom. They're telling their students they have to be on Google Class in a Zoom session at the time. So the teacher wants them in front of their camera in the Zoom, and then they take the assessment for that hour. They're having them do it on paper, handwritten. And then they take a picture of the results of it and email it back as part of the Google Classroom. So again, it helps a little bit integrity. One more way to kind of help make sure students are doing it in a certain time frame, doing it at the computer themselves, and still probably need to make it an open note or something, open textbook, just to help ensure equity across all students' behavior as well.
Those are good
Thanks,
ideas.
Liz. I'm going to go back to the other questions. I wanted to share something that Lisa shared for everybody, especially AP teachers. There's an AP English teacher on Instagram named, quote, Doc Cop. That's very, very good, who may also have ideas about online testing for AP classes. All right, so I just wanted to make sure that I shared that.
Great.
Seemed important. I'm going to go back to the questions in a sec, but I'm also going to field one more or a couple more from the control panel. What do you think about doing lecture and discussions using Zoom when there is a PowerPoint you wish to use for a topic? I teach AP Gov, so lecture discussion is a large part of my teaching.
I think that's fine. I mean, if that's how you teach, that's how you teach. You need to be authentic to how you are. I personally don't have a problem with that at all. Like, that's how you are as a teacher. So you need to, as I said, you need to be honest for yourself. One thing that you might need to talk to your school about is the expectation that the students are always going to be online for those Zoom discussions. That's something to just check with your school about. I believe mine, you have to, if the kids are required to be there, you have to give 24-hour notice so that they know. That's the only thing I would say, but just check with your school.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see.
There's a couple more questions. Yep.
Oh, go for it.
Oh, no, you're good. You can use the questions that folks wrote in when they registered.
Okay, let's see. Amanda, ways to connect with students using Google Classroom, how to allow for redos, tests, projects, but keep it manageable. A lot of what we've already just talked about, reaching out to the students individually. Students can resubmit stuff on Google Classroom. You can assign them work on Google Classroom that only goes to them. So I would just do what you do in the classroom, just assign it on Google Classroom. I think we've already talked a little bit about the IPs. Meaningful assessment in a remote environment, curb cheating, we've talked a little bit about that. For a meaningful assessment, I would try to pick topics that interest them. You know, if there's a way you can make a dry topic more interesting, go for it. Let me see. What are your top tips for assessing student writing remotely? I think we've talked a lot about that. Using the nice thing, if you use Google Docs, you can see how often things have been edited. So you can always see that, the revision history. Letting kids just take a picture of their work and turn it in, that works as well. On Google Docs, you can even do comments. So you could have a full conversation with the student about their work and say, hey, you know, what do you mean by such and such? What do you mean by such and such? So you can have that conversation. What are some tips for special education paraprofessionals who want to support? One of our attendees earlier talked about being a member of the Google Classroom. I think that's great. Or don't be afraid to reach out to the teacher. You know, in my case, I do have some case coordinators that do like to see the agenda, do want to see the agendas for their students. Things like that, I think, would really work. And how can we accurately assess students during remote learning? Oh, I'm sure that could be its own session in itself. I think personally, trying to make the assessments very clear, condensed, and simple make the most sense, because they're doing a lot right now online. Really trying to focus in on those learning objectives and make sure that's what we're going for, and it's just not more than what it needs to be. That's my personal view.
Just to chime in, on Thursday, we're actually having another webinar around assessment in remote and personally designed assessment and during this remote learning time. So that's Thursday.
Oh, perfect.
Somebody wanted to know how you get your Vocaroo, the recording. How did the kids hand it in to you?
They can just copy and paste a link. Let me see. So if you want, actually, I'll guide you through it. If you go to www.vocaroo.com, I'm not sure if you want to do a screen share.
Oh wait, let me Yep. Now our webinar should be over in 2 minutes. And so I want to try
Okay.
actually to, but I think I have a yes, please here. So I think someone wants to go into Vocaru. So let's do that real quick. Okay.
It'll take
So tell me
maybe a
what
minute.
to do.
All right. So this is a great example. Let's go to www.vocaroo.com, VOCAROO.com.
Okay.
Click on the red button.
Okay.
Speak.
Allow.
Yeah. So let's pretend we're speaking. All right. You can stop it now. Okay. You wanted to click on the red button. So click the stop. Click the stop. Now click save and share. And right now you have a live link. You could just copy and paste that link and turn it on Google Classroom.
Got it.
And you're done.
Love it. Love it. Or I can also download it to my desktop, can't I?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I got a yes, please, and then I got a cool in the comments. So that was good. That's a boon. You're welcome.
Hey, Karen and Lindsay, I also, again, I got to mention that I believe it's state law that you have to have student permission if you're recording their voice or their video.
Yes.
So again,
Absolutely.
teachers, make sure you get that permission.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I am going to be responsible, and I'm going to try to bring this webinar to an end. I think that maybe we can just take the last couple minutes if you're willing to stay on for 3 or 4 more minutes. If not, this webinar is being recorded, so feel free to check out, and you will be sent a recording after the webinar, so you're not going to miss much. But if you want to stay on for another few minutes, we will just go through the last few slides, and Lindsay can answer any last questions that you have. We talked about translate temptation, correct?
Yes, I believe we did.
Okay, so let's go to the next. I am worried about the lack of live. We talked about that. Thinking instead of Zoom sessions, video chat assignments.
I think, the biggest thing on this one, I'll say, is we had an attendee who talked about needing to do a lecture environment, and I completely understand that. You got to probably Zoom makes the most sense. For a lot of students, I would either start with just a written discussion at first and then upgrade to video chats and then try to get them in to have a discussion on Zoom. But again, this is a question where you know your students and you know if they'll be happy to do it or not. I have 5 classes. I have 2 that would do a Zoom session with each other, no problem. The other ones, you might have to do something a little bit different. It's going to be different, and that's the reality of remote teaching. However, you can still have valuable conversation. You might just need to happen through Vocaroo recordings, or you might need to have it happen through Flipgrid as well.
Thanks, Lindsay.
This one was just asked to me by a teacher in the past, and she said, I would like to do progress reflections and have kids comment on each other's work and give feedback. This is a great time to do that because they can write their comments. However, I would make sure they know how to write good feedback comments, make sure you model it, and I would really do it on something like Google Classroom where it's very easy to see what people are saying so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was fabulous. And we're getting all sorts of thank yous and fabulousness in the comments. So thanks, Lindsay. Just wanted to let all of you know that these are some of the upcoming webinars on the left-hand side. If you go to the Demonstrated Success site, and so it's demonstratedsuccess.com, and then in the upper right, there's going to be workshops and webinars, and you can drop down the menu, and there's, it's called Virtual Teaching in New Hampshire, and then you can register for all and any of our webinars right there, okay? So just demonstratedsuccess.com, webinars and workshops and than virtual teaching in New Hampshire. So that's open for you. And Lindsay has included her email here, which I think is fabulous, Lindsay, because I'm sure that people might have follow-up questions. So we really appreciate that. And that's it. And everyone will be receiving a certificate. You will all be receiving a link to the PowerPoint, access to the recording. And that's about it. Mike, anything else you can think of?
Nope, you got it. Thank you both. This is great.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of these extraordinarily busy days. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Mike. And we hope to see you all again soon. And take good care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye for now.